so we have our B&T chassis here, a slide, and a SIG 320. Some assembly required. Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum, and today I'm actually down here in Texas at ModGuns, used to be SIG Sauer Parts, taking a look at some of the capabilities of today's modern modular firearms. So ModGuns is set up to be a third-party inventory warehouse, sort of a general reseller of parts for modular platform firearms. And one of the best, most modular firearms that's out there on the market today is the SIG 320. So the cool thing is, with the 320, they have set it up so that this thing, the FCU, or Fire Control Unit, this is actually the legally controlled registered firearm part. And SIG actually sells FCUs like this just as standalone units, which means that you can then go in and customize absolutely everything else about the gun, which is really cool. It can be relatively long barrels, medium-sized barrels, short barrels, red dot sights, iron sights, long grip frames, short grip frames, stippled frames, various different aftermarket aesthetic designs of frames, whatever this is, you name it. There's like an uncountable number of options out there. So ModGuns said, hey, it'd be really cool if I came down and played around with actually building up a 320 of my own. So we're going to start with one of these FCUs. And the thing that I've always been really interested in, ever since I first saw them, is Ruger & Thomas Universal Service Weapon, or USW concept, which is essentially a pistol with a shoulder stock on it. And because B&T now actually makes a USW grip frame for the SIG 320, and of course ModGuns carries them, we're going to build up one of these. So let's put all of these complete pistols away, and let's go back to raw components and see what it takes to actually build a 320. All right, so SIG doesn't actually sell completely stripped FCUs like this, but just to show the whole process and how this isn't necessarily that daunting of a task, we're going to go ahead and start from a completely stripped one. The other caveat I want to throw out here at the very beginning is that this has actually been registered as a short-barreled rifle, because in order to legally put it into this housing, this grip frame with a shoulder stock, it has to be registered as a short-barreled rifle. And again, this is the legal part, therefore this is the thing that gets registered. This, the plastic module here, is legally nothing. This can ship straight to your door. And when B&T ships them, by the way, they come with the stock section here not installed, just in the box. And so you can install this part onto the gun while you're waiting for your tax stamp to come back on the actual stock. All right, so I have a SIG Armor's block, which should be a little bit helpful, not strictly necessary. And then for this process, I'm going to need a couple of pin punches. I am going to need a brass hammer at one point, and a dental pick, just kind of helpful, and a pair of needle nose pliers. There we go, needle nose pliers. A couple things. These are all standard components here, with the exception of two. So I have an Apex trigger bar that I am going to be using, which will give me a little bit better of a trigger press. That includes an over travel stop in it. So we'll set this up here for later in the process. And I thought it would be pretty cool to have nickel colored small parts. So this isn't something that SIG generally offers as an option, but through ModGuns here, because SIG has made nickel special run pistols, you can get the nickel parts. So we've got those. So things like the slide release and the trigger are nickeled. And if you're wondering why I'm using an Apex trigger bar but not an Apex trigger, it's because I want to use a nickel one. So I've got all of these bits as well. All right, we are going to start with the sear housing. I have a disconnector here that needs to sit right there, but I want to put a little bit of lubricant on it because this is just really hard to get to after this point. It's actually probably a bit more than we need. There we go. So that goes in there. And then we have an open spot right here for that little spring. We're going to go ahead and slide that guy in. There we go. And at this point, these three parts can go into the actual FCU. And there's a roll pin that goes through this hole right there. Slide that into place. This is the one spot where the armorer's block really is kind of handy. So there's our roll pin. That roll pin is a single-use item. So once you have installed it once you take it out, get a new roll pin, because roll pins do deform over time. That's nicely lined up. The hole in the sear housing is slightly oversized, so this will move after the roll pin's in. And there's no particular specification here, you just want the pin approximately centered in the FCU. Next, we're going to slide in this plate, which is going to sit right about there. And then we're going to put in the first of our fire control pins. The first one that goes in is this guy. All the pins go in from the left. So we're going to put that in here. It goes through that little plate and over to there. Next up, this is the actual sear, and it has two little nubs right there. I want to put our two sear springs onto those nubs. They're tight enough that they will hold there. And then this drops into the sear housing. The springs go in the back there. Once we've got the sear in place, I'm actually going to use a punch here to kind of just an undersized punch to hold everything in place, because we do have some spring-loaded bits. And we're going to run this pin through to hold the sear in. There we go, almost. This one's a little tight here. There we go. All right, next up we've got the trigger bar to install. This front area goes inside the FCU, and then we've got this tail on the back here that goes in front of that spring. So when I install this, I'm going to use this pick to pull the spring back a little bit, like so. So let's slide that in there. And then, by the way, this right here hooks around that pin. So let's put that guy in there. There we go.
There you go.
Okay.
You got the click.
There we go. And it went click after a couple brief taps with the hammer. And once that's installed, you can see a little spring tension on it right there from that spring on the inside. Now that we have the bar in place, we have this little pin that goes in. And because I'm using an Apex trigger, we also have this spring and this bushing that need to go in. And the way we do this is, I'm going to do this by putting the spring on a pick here, and we're going to put it, there we go, right down onto the pin. And then I need this bushing to go over the top, and I'm going to use the needle nose pliers for that, hopefully. There we go. And presto, there we go. So that pin is now all the way through. We've got our bushing in place. Now we can get on to the trickiest bit of this whole assembly, which is this last lever. So we've got our trigger return spring here, our trigger spring here. We're going to hook this through from the inside out like that. And then the dogleg end goes through this little hole. Oops. There we go. Now, there are a couple different ways you can do this. The one I'm going to go for here is to basically pull this forward like this. So that's flat up here. I'm then going to take my trigger, and install it, you'll notice there's a little stud right there that has to go into the bar. So we're going to put that in place if we can, and then work this forward. There we go. All right, we're almost done here. We'd still have to put in the bolt stop and release. So this guy is going to go in with this spring and this little plunger. Note that it has a large side there and a small side. We want the large side to go in the spring. There we go. And then we want the small side to go in that. All right, I want to hold it, the spring facing out this way. I'm going to bring my FCU around, and I'm going to set this in place, and then I have a pin that will go through these two holes and this hole, and that's this last pin. There we go, we got it in the first side. And all the way through. And we should have spring tension on that from the little plunger and spring right there. All right, we have one more part to install, and this actually goes into the frame, and that is the takedown lever. So it has an O-ring that has to go in that little groove. This is kind of a pain in the butt because the O-rings are rather undersized. But there we go. All right, and then we need to get it into this far recess. So let's see if we can get this. There we go. All right. With the O-ring all the way in, we can now install this in the slide. Pop back, just like that. And there we are. Now, that being said, there is an element that I want to change here. Because I am left-handed, I would like to swap the magazine release. So as a lefty, with this B&T grip frame, I actually have a really good thumb contact with the magazine release. So normally as a lefty, I use my index finger for mags, but on this particular gun, I do want to swap it over, and that can be done. So I'm just gonna push this through, and there's a little hole right there. Basically, I need to wiggle the front toe of this mag catch out. There we go. And then just pry that little guy out. I can then take my mag catch with the spring still in it. We're going to flip this over and slide it back in to the other side, like that, and put this little guy back in until it clicks. There's the click, and presto, we now have a left side magazine release. Now we have to start making some difficult choices because I need a slide to go on this guy. So the standard slide, 5-inch barrel, is this guy, which is going to look approximately like that. That's not bad. That's sort of our baseline there, standard SIG slide. ModGuns has lots of other options though, because we also have, for example, the SIG slide with some of the speed holes cut in it, so a little bit less mass. Now this is the shorter barrel, which doesn't really fit in there. We have the really aggressively open cut ones. This is agency, and I'll be honest, that look appeals to some people, really doesn't appeal to me. So the standard SIG looks pretty good, but there is one other option that I saw back in the warehouse, and that is the syndicate slide that Agency does. And this has basically checkering instead of slide serrations. And I think that looks pretty darn cool. Now this one is set up with a compensator. So this is the mid-length slide, not the full-length slide. It'd be a 3.9-inch barrel. You can see that's a bit shorter than the full-size slide. So I'm thinking this is what we should go with. Now the compensator will make it a little bit smoother to shoot. It will reduce muzzle climb, which the B&T stock should already reduce muzzle climb nicely. This will make it just even better. And they actually make both one chamber, one port like that, and also 2-port brakes. Well, I'm not trying to conceal this at all, so an extra 1/4 inch or so of length is just fine. So I think we're going to go ahead and use a 2-chamber brake. So here's our barrel. This is sized for the 3.9-inch slide, which is the mid-length slide. SIG's small slide is 3.6, and their long one is 4.7. So let's pull this guy out. And then, of course, it has a threaded muzzle for our compensator. We've got the compensator itself here. There we go. Overall barrel length on this is actually 4.6 inch because it's longer than the slide because of the threading. So what we're going to end up doing is threading this on until it stops, and then we'll loosen it back off to time it and install, well, tighten down that pair of set screws. So we'll do that in a moment. But first, we have our slide. It's an Agency part. So one of the cool things about ModGuns is they carry not just SIG parts, but also all of the other manufacturers who do custom components for SIG and for other modular guns. So there's our slide and our recoil spring assembly. This comes with a little bit of red Loctite and an Allen key. So we're going to go ahead, the 2 screws came in the comp, so we'll go ahead and pull those out. Get just a little dab of Loctite on them. That was a mistake. That was dumb. Dumb. Nothing. You people in there saw nothing. Completely covered in Loctite is the goal, right?
If you never want to take it off.
All right, get some Loctite on those. Go ahead and tighten both of these screws down. And presto, we have our compensator installed. All right, now we can put in the recoil spring. Agency's recoil spring system is actually a little bit annoying because it is not captive where the standard SIG ones are. So we're going to go ahead and slide that in there. That compresses down. And we want the flat sides vertical like that. All right, we are getting to the very final steps here. Let's go ahead and pull this out for a moment and put in our fire control unit. This is going to slide in the back here into a couple little grooves. Pull the trigger back to get it through. Drop that in. The B&T ones are really particularly tight. Get that through. Now we can properly install. Okay, we've got our takedown lever reinstalled now that it's through the FCU. Then we'll go ahead and take the slide assembly. That is just going to slide on. Through the rails there. There we go. That looks really slick. I like that quite a lot. Now this is currently set up for iron sights, so we're going to go ahead and take this plate off. We're going to put on a red dot. All right, what some of you have probably noticed, quick interlude here, is this is actually a stripped slide, so I still need to put the striker and the extractor, all of those components into the slide. But for the moment, let's go ahead and finish our red dot installation here. We're going to take off the regular top plate. We're going to install an RMR footprint top plate right there. And then we are going to drop on, well, let's see, we're going to screw that plate down first. All right, there's our RMR plate. I'm going to put a little sealing plate in, and we are going to stick an RMR on this, an RMR 06. And there we go. Give that a proper 21 round mag. I really like the way that looks. I think that's a really cool design to the slide. It's got some neat custom feature to it, but it's not really ostentatious. And I think the nickeled small parts really stand out nicely against the black frame and slide. That compensator should work really well. Normally you would want a full-length slide on the B&T, but that comp really rounds out the profile of the slide very nicely. Should run very well. And now all I have to do is just go back out to the warehouse and grab the internal parts for the slide. All right, quick interlude here. I am attempting to take the slide off to put all the internals in the gun in the slide. And the agency recoil spring has gotten canted or something inside there, and it's really being annoying, and I can't get the slide off. So as soon as I get this off, we're going back to the standard stock SIG recoil spring that is contained, and I think will be a lot nicer than the agency one. All right, I am not the only person who has ever needed to fill out a stripped slide. So, oh, and by the way, here's our proper SIG recoil spring. That is really a lot nicer to use. So we'll be leaving that in there. Anyway, ModGuns has a complete kit to fill out the slide. So extractor pin, extractor spring, slide rear cap, striker assembly, extractor, and extractor spring, and pin. All right, so here we have all our parts. This is actually also a fairly easy process. So here's our extractor. We're just going to drop that into the slide there. We then have a 3-part extractor spring and retention system. And we're going to press the spring down onto the pin, and then we've got the rear half of the pin. There we go, that goes in like that. This then slides in the back of the slide, and it's going to mate up with the extractor there. We then have the whole striker assembly, which actually isn't nearly as bad to disassemble as it looks, but it comes as a unit, so we're just going to leave it like that. That goes in, and we just have to depress this far enough to slide our end cap in right there. There we go. That has locked in place between the 2 lobes of that extractor pin. Now we have a completed upper assembly. Lock that open. There we go. And we have our completed SIG 320 USW. Now it's time to take this out to the range and do some playing with it. So full disclosure here, ModGuns is providing me with this package for free without payment in exchange for talking about them here on video. So if you are looking for SIG 320 parts, whether they're made by SIG or by any of the other aftermarket companies like B&T, like Agency, that make 320 parts, definitely check them out. I will not have a link in the website. I will not have a link in the description text below because YouTube doesn't allow it. But ModGuns, modguns.com. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Stick around tomorrow. We'll take this puppy out to the range and see how it shoots. Thanks for watching.